a few minutes and let the people join us. Let's make sure our volume's on. If you're out there, say hello, and if you can double check that you can hear me, and that we're all set. And then we'll start talking about stuff. Okay, so good afternoon. It is 4 o'clock on it's Wednesday. I took yesterday off, so I know I've got quite a few text messages and calls asking if I was alive and okay and all that kind of stuff. Thank you for people checking in, Ray and Anda. Did I pronounce that right? Is it Anda or Anda? I'm not sure. In any event, I did take yesterday off, and that was as other work. Some sales calls kind of took some of my time away, but we're glad to be back today. And I also appreciate Monday we had Sean on and a lot of information on that podcast, and so I was glad to have him on. We didn't actually talk about Tweed. He's a director of Tweed, and we should have at some point talked about the future of that. But what I can get away with Sean is a little different because he's running unopposed. So like tomorrow we're going to have Robin Comey on. In that race I may not have both candidates on, but in the other races I will have as many candidates as I can on, or that want to come on. And sometimes you want to give people a chance late in the race to respond, as opposed to making a claim 2 or 3 days before the election when you can't have the opponent on. So Sean I can have on now, and I can also have on that week before the election, even talking about the election. So he was kind of safer to put on. And, we have to be honest, not running for office, not having an opponent, allows him to be a little more blunt and honest about it. Not that he hasn't been in the past. We will be talking about, I think, a little bit about Ethan's Law tomorrow, some changes to that, not changes to that, but some movement on an aspect of that law that I was big on getting training in gun training. And the state coming up with a curriculum for schools to adopt if they choose to on gun safety. I have always subscribed to the theory that education has rarely been a bad thing. Learning more about alcohol abuse in school, while it's scary, and there's some graphic photos and there's graphic demonstrations, has been a good thing. Learning more about drug use and the impacts is a good thing. Learning more about the impacts of sex and pregnancy and all these other things that have lifelong impacts, learning about them, no matter how dangerous, no matter how graphic, is a good thing. It results in people being more informed. But guns, so many people in education have fought teaching people gun safety. And it doesn't mean you have to buy a gun. It doesn't mean you have to run out and grab something or be afraid of them. You have to understand how they work. You have to understand how to be safe. And part of Ethan's Law was the part that Democrats loved. There was going to be better protection for guns and separation of bullets and the containers they're stored in. But there was a second part of that, and that second part of it was what made the bill so bipartisan, by having an instrument by which the state would create a curriculum to teach gun safety in schools. Now, each school would have to adopt it, so we have no guarantee that a school like Brantford or Guilford or Madison would adopt that curriculum, but that curriculum will be available. And so, when that bill passed, Democrats were, especially in Guilford where the tragedy happened that prompted the law, they were so praiseworthy of it. And an article I wrote at the time was, all right, so we now have this law, let's make sure it's enforced. And the feeling was they were praising that aspect of it, but not the education aspect of it. But we may have some movement on that. So tomorrow, if we have an update, or by next week, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Again, I don't think education has ever been a bad thing in these situations. But overall, taking yesterday off, and then Monday having Sean on, we didn't really get a chance to talk of the absolute disaster that was this weekend from a news standpoint, from whatever Trump is doing, from where we go from here. So we have spent a lot of time talking about this stimulus package. And to those that work with small businesses, to work in the field, At our business model, we do news, we do media, but we also work with many small companies on social media management and strategy and branding. And then obviously we have this forum where we can take a business and put some gas on their marketing efforts. That's kind of an advantage for us. But we talk every day with small businesses. And part of that, the stimulus package for years, or for the last year, was that people that had that extra $600, as much as many of them were making more money than they had before, in some cases, much more money than they had before. There's a simple principle that where people who are not high earners, people who are only making a couple $100 a week, they spend their money. They don't have the ability to save. They don't making extra money. And so when you take money and you put it in the hands of people who are not necessarily have savings or necessarily well off, it serves as a stimulus to the economy because they're out spending. They're out getting pizza takeout. They're out getting groceries. They're out getting clothing items. They're supporting these businesses. And so many of these small businesses were propped up by 11, 12, 13 million people with extra money in their pockets. So fundamentally, we say, man, these people are making more money than they were before. They don't want to go back to work. And that was partially true. However, in some cases, they also helped stimulate countless numbers of small businesses that were failing otherwise, that would not have had that otherwise. Look at it this way. There's only so many pizzas wealthy people can eat. So if more people didn't have money for those pizzas, that business would have been down. Those people working there would have been down as well. So we prop that up and we minimize the damage in many of these small businesses by putting that money in people's hands. That being said, there was a real concern that when the jobs reappeared, that those that were making more money weren't going to apply for them. And that turned out to be true. I know many small businesses put out jobs, nobody was applying for them, nobody that was qualified applying for them. So you have this, we talk about nothing being black and white, you have pros and cons to this. But Congress had to work quickly anyway. This thing happened, you had to react quickly. But then in the last couple of days, so we saw the economy start getting a little bit better. We saw some businesses doing a little better, restaurants opening. We saw Connecticut, we're going to phase 3, so we have more seats inside, which is good because at the same time we're losing the outside seats as we get colder. But we saw movie theaters shut down. We're seeing some restaurants. We just heard today, Lenny and Joe's in New Haven, a fairly popular restaurant, shutting down for good. So now we're starting to see this second wave of businesses that are shut down. And the jobs that may have been there, even if people took those jobs temporarily, are now suddenly gone. And you have people back trying to pay bills that are not getting a stimulus. And so we have had, I will say, kind of a running joke. The Democrats put up a stimulus bill. Now, it was a flawed stimulus bill. There's no question. Those who were critical of it were right in that they added a lot of, I'll say, personal ideology on marijuana and other things that had nothing to do with COVID. So there was some room to negotiate. It was kind of a starting, bid out there. Republicans took forever to come up with a response and waited till right about the time the benefits were going to end, which was ridiculous. There was no excuse for that. It was basically a big middle finger to the American people. It said, we don't care. We're not going to come up with a plan. We're not going to present anything to negotiate. Did nothing for, I think it was 6 weeks or so, or longer. They put out a plan that was drastically lower, reduced weekly benefits, and really was a non-starter. Was never going to go very far. But since that time, the economy has gotten significantly worse. A numbers standpoint, we're fine. The market itself, not terrible. End of October, September, October has not been great, but Main Street has gotten worse. We have been rescued by people eating outside. That's about to end. And we're seeing more and more closings of restaurants, of businesses, what have you. But the urgency has not picked up. And so we now have a situation where the Democrats are putting out a $2.3, $2.4 trillion plan. Republicans are back with a $1.5, $1.6 trillion plan and $800 billion, which realistically in this day and age is nothing when it comes to government spending, is the difference. Making it 10 times worse is that Trump tweets something different every 5 minutes. On one post, it's let's pass this, let's get this done. On the next post, it's Pelosi's playing games. On the next post, it's and it doesn't matter what Pelosi and Mnuchin, who's representing the White House, actually come to an agreement on, because the senators, the Republican senators in the Senate, don't seem to be behind anything. So let's go even further here. Let's suppose, based on polling, we'll talk about polling in a second, but let's suppose for a second that the Democrats take the presidency and the Senate. And based on polling, that seems like it's a distinct possibility. Maybe not a probability yet. President maybe, but not a probability for the Senate, but a possibility. You still have to wait for the new people to take office. We're talking January. The people who are out of jobs, those small businesses now, as it gets colder, and they will lose customers as people do not have stimulus money in their pocket, it is October 7th. We're talking a few months before the Democrats would have the numbers to pass what they want. If the Republicans are thinking, okay, after the election, we'll pass something, we'll work with them, then why not do it now? What is the holdup now? And for weeks, I could have said, okay, maybe there's some master strategy. Like maybe Trump is saying, let's wait until we're closer to the election. We'll pass this $1,200 bill, we'll pass this bill with the $1,200 payment, so people get that before the election. That $600 starts before the election, or $400, or whatever amount it was. Let's do that. But it's now October 7th. We're reaching a dangerous territory where you're not going to ever get a $1,200 payment before Election Day. So as political scientists, as historians, if we look back at this over time and say, what is Trump thinking? I don't see a strategy here. I get Pelosi's strategy. Pelosi's strategy, she has all power, right? She wants to give more money to people. Now, we have not gotten a ton of information on the specifics of negotiation. How much is going towards the $600 unemployment? How much is going towards the $1,200 payments? How much is going towards PPP? How much may be going towards other pet projects? We don't have that. But $800 billion in the scheme of things, in the middle of a crisis, with positive cases, the percentage is increasing, it doesn't make any sense to fight it. As I said before, in past podcasts, when the Democrats came up and said, we want to pass a $3 trillion plan, Trump politically should have said, I want $4. I just want to give as much money to the American people as I possibly can. That $1,200 payment, let's make it $1,800. How he wasn't doing that, I don't know. And especially now when we look at the polling. So if you open Real Clear Politics, if you want to follow along with what I look at, I like Real Clear because it takes a bunch of polls and put them together, so we kind of avoid the outliers of the poll. And there's always a couple crazy outliers. So hold on one second. So in Real Clear Politics, we're going to compare this, by the way, to 2016 in a second. The national average, Biden is up 9.4 points. The key to that isn't 9.4. It's two aspects. When I look at polls, I'm looking at two things. One, has any candidate gotten over the 50% threshold? And when we combine those polls, Biden's at 51.4%, Trump's at 42%. That's a big deal. The second one is, what is the momentum? So even if polls are off, they tend to be consistently off. If a poll is off 3%, you take one on Tuesday and the next Tuesday and the next Tuesday, it's kind of consistently off that 3% based on their methodology and how they take that poll. So looking at momentum, the poll is probably a better indicator than just looking at the number itself. And all of the numbers show Biden moving in the right direction. It is just incredibly consistent. I don't see Trump making up room. Somebody just commented, why should we listen to you? Don't. I don't know who you are, but don't. There's no one forcing you. I don't think anybody's holding a gun to your head to listen to me. You don't have to. This is the same reason you don't have to watch The Office or Seinfeld or CNN or whatever you want. We live in a free country. So thank you for trolling, but if you'd like to join and add something constructive, you're welcome to. So looking at that poll, everything points towards Biden. But I'm going to read this article from CNN. And it is an article dated Christ's sake with this. "4:43 p.m." All right, CNN has more pop-ups than I can possibly imagine. On Sunday, October 23rd, 2016. So Sunday, October 23rd, 2016. Here's the headline. "New poll shows Clinton over Trump by double digits." Hillary Clinton has a 12-point lead over Donald Trump and has reached 50% support nationally among likely voters, a new ABC News tracking poll shows. The poll shows Clinton with 50% support to Trump's 38%, with 5% backing Libertarian Gary Johnson and 2% supporting the Green Party's Jill Stein. So, even with other people in the race, Gary Johnson, that's 5%, that's not small, and Jill Stein, so 7% going to them, Clinton was still over 50%. Nobody else on the ticket between Biden and Trump comes anywhere close to that. And Biden's over that 50% threshold. Well, this is still worrying if you are a Biden supporter. The poll comes on the heels of a third presidential debate, which the post-debate CNN Snap poll showed Clinton won. The ABC News survey results show Clinton with a 20-point advantage among women and a 3-point edge with men, a group that is tilted towards Trump for most of the 2016 race. So, just go into this polling for a second. Everything we just talked about, I look at momentum with polls, I look at over that 50% threshold. All of that was going in Hillary Clinton's favor. Clinton leads among voters of all education levels, but her 3-point advantage with those without college degrees is smaller than her 20-point lead among voters with college degrees. So she even led with those without college degrees. It's typically a rule of thumb that Trump gets the uneducated, and I don't mean that in as less than, just people who have not gone to college. Trump's strongest group remains white, non-college educated voters who back him 55% to 36%. The results showing Clinton with a growing lead largely matched CNN polls of polls, which averages recent national surveys. That showed Clinton ahead 48% to 39%. The ABC News poll was conducted October 20th to 22nd. So 2 weeks before Election Day, polls showed Hillary Clinton up 12 points. So this is the problem with polling right now. If you're Trump, and you look at these polls, you'd think you just want to throw as much money as you possibly can. The stunts of, he got positive and I'll take that for what it's worth, but then driving around and taking his mask off and then everybody in the White House getting it. And even after that's happening, all of the polling shows Biden up 9.4%. Even if we go to various states, Mary, that's why we can't believe the polls, because people aren't saying. I think you're absolutely correct. My theory is that there are people out there, especially Trump supporters, when they get a call, are saying, "I'm not answering it." Or, not only are they not saying, "I'm not answering it," if they were saying, "I'm not answering it," the poll would be off, but they're adding their vote to the other side. And the question is, what percentage? So last week we talked about if we had moved 2%, if these polls were off 2%. Let's go to these battlegrounds. Florida, Biden is up 4.6% in Florida. So if these are 2% off, it goes to, you can follow along with me if you're on Real Clear Politics in the upper right-hand corner. It goes to 2.6% and he wins. Pennsylvania, he's up 7.1. 2% off, you're down to 5.1. It just refreshed on me. So he covers a 2-point difference in almost every major state. The question is, what if it's not a 2-point difference? What if the polls are off 5 points? Now, they tightened up on Hillary going into Election Day, but nowhere near enough that she had significant leads in many, many polls. Trump could still win. And with all the polls going in the opposite direction, all the momentum going in the opposite direction, by most accounts, disastrous debate. Not that Biden had a great debate, but he can still pull this out. As much as there's a chance that Biden takes the presidency and the Democrats take Senate, and by the way, if you're hoping for a bigger stimulus package, if you're depending on that, that's how you're going to vote. That means more money in your pocket. If the Democrats win everything, it probably gets to a $3.5–4 trillion package. payouts till the end of January or February, which more would come if the vaccine isn't found in that time. I don't know what the Republicans will do because they've given us no real indication, despite the urgency. By the way, Jay Powell is the chairman of the Fed. He came out again and said, we need more stimulus. Every expert is saying we need more stimulus. Everyone on Wall Street. If you're saying Trump is for Wall Street, there is no real indication of it right now because he's not listening to them. They all understand the buying power of people that have spending cash. When you take spending cash away from those people, there's only so many pizzas, there's only so many gallons of milk a rich person can buy. The people that have money are going to spend money, but nowhere near enough to make up for all the mouths and all the demand of all those people when they have some money in their pocket. Not passing a stimulus makes no sense. I don't know how it makes sense politically. The polls certainly don't show it. It's certainly not the humanitarian thing to do. People need money right now. There's a lot of foreclosures about to happen. A lot of people are going to lose their rent. Pelosi has all the power. How Trump is not taking that argument from her makes no sense to me, makes no political sense. But this is where we stand right now. And so I don't see any easy answers for this, but it's actually kind of amazing that with a month to go in this race, the polls going the wrong way, Trump has not come up with some massive plan to put as much money as humanly possible in people's pockets, even if it includes some extra things that Pelosi's putting in there. Pete Dodd, a comment, those 2016 polls are also before Comey, but yeah, I don't trust the polls. Yes, they were. That's true. Oh, Comey was kind of a bombshell. When did Comey happen? It's hard to imagine that people just drastically changed on the Comey investigation because there had been a bunch of rumors about that before, but I'm sure it played an absolute role. I do think Trump is such a polarizing figure. And I will say this till the day I die. The Democrats are worse at attacking people than the Republicans right now. On social media, it is like a crime to say you're a Trump fan. If you say, I was on a thing today, and I forgot what it was, but I said President Obama posted a number of jobs that were created under each president. And Bill Clinton was a massive number, just a huge number under Bill Clinton, and it crashed obviously under George Bush, a huge number under Obama, and it crashed under Trump. And I posted, listen, this is, it's greatly misleading because you're taking things out of context. And if we put things in context, we realize a few things. The economy under Clinton was a grossly false economy, right? We had deregulation, which was ridiculous. We had an economy on a housing market that was propped up. And we knew very soon after that it was a disaster. But he got out of there. 9/11 happens, and then which hurt, and then you have that massive crash, years later, which Clinton helped set up with his deregulation. So yes, the numbers were great under Clinton and dropped under Bush, but Bush dealt with things that were, beyond reasonable. Clinton could have taken out Osama bin Laden, so Bush dealt with those. Then you get to Obama, who takes over the worst economy in 7-8 decades. Clearly, you're going to go up. And then you blame Trump for COVID. Trump's not to blame for COVID. You can say maybe he could have prevented some of the impacts, but he's certainly not completely to blame. So we can't look at presidents just on the year they were president. That's not fair. It's not honest. It's intellectually dishonest, actually. We have to look at a much larger viewpoint, and we also have to look at what were the impacts of the policies those presidents passed. Bill Clinton's a disaster. Bill Clinton in history, if we get past the part that, women liked him and, that he was liberal and Democrat, all this other stuff, he had more women issues than you could possibly imagine. And he passed bills that were disastrous for the black community, disastrous for the banking community, disastrous for the housing community, and was one of the largest factors contributing to what became one of the largest economic crashes ever. So we can't just look at things. So I posted just that. I posted, we can't look at things through this small lens. We have to, this is misleading to look at it this way. And about 20 people attack you. You're a Trumper, you're nuts, you don't know what you're talking about, all this other stuff. I'm saying to myself, when did reason and logic just get thrown out the window? But that's what happens right now if you are a Trump fan. And to every Democrat out there attacking people and going after people and calling them names and idiots and losers and fools for supporting Trump, you're helping get Trump in, because that person who may have been on the fence is never going to vote for a Democrat after that. Because we've talked about this too. There are not enough Trump supporters. I'm not talking about voters. There's not enough Trump supporters for Trump to win. In 2016, there were people that were tired of the Democrats. 2016, there were people that didn't like Hillary. There were people that were tired of political correctness. They said, enough of this. I want an outsider. I want this guy who's yelling and screaming about the system. And they said, I want change. They voted for Trump. The difference between Hillary Clinton and Biden is Hillary Clinton's dislikes were significantly higher. People had already made up their mind they didn't like Hillary. Biden, there isn't such a hatred for. Most people are kind of indifferent. Nobody in this election is saying, I think Biden's the answer to our problems. Nobody. The people who are for Biden are really against Trump. And the worry is, what can happen between now and Election Day that gives more energy? I'll repeat, I'm going to read that comment in a second. That gives more energy to Trump. Now, there's another big issue that we have to remember, that we have far more early voting now. We have far more absentee votes now, where people are filling out their ballots right now. So right now, today, people are filling out their decision, not just waiting to Election Day. So the ability of a candidate like Trump to make up ground late in the race becomes minimized, or not minimized, but lessened, because they won't be able to do that. Pete, putting the bills Clinton passed on just him when it was part of Gingrich's promise to America is also misleading. Both parties created that shit show together. Okay, I agree with you, Pete, but it doesn't happen without him. So we always talk about, for example, in the Supreme Court, we're talking about let the people decide. Well, the people decided that Bill Clinton should be president, and he signed that bill. And an argument can be made, I think a real argument can be made, that he signed that bill because of the political hits he was taking from something that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with things he was doing in his Oval Office with an intern. So he brought a lot of that on himself. But we can't have a double standard. We can't say, well, wait a minute, let's not put a Supreme Court nominee up and let's wait for the people to speak. But when we do put somebody in that office, he's not responsible for where he signed his name. He signed his name to that bill. He didn't need to. He also signed his name to a crime bill that was devastating to the Black community. A generation of Black men were gone from their families over 3 marijuana busts. And he'll admit that. So I can't, yes, there are circumstances that play a role, but I can't negate the responsibility someone would have when they sign their own name on the bottom of it. Tracy, yet Hillary won the popular vote. That's correct. Unfortunately, that's not the way we choose our president. Mary, it's both sides. I was reading NPR with Michelle Obama's comments. The violence was hard on both sides. Instead of discussing issues, they attacked the person. What people said to each other was terrible. Both sides are guilty. Mary, I agree with you that there's a nastiness on both sides. In my opinion, I have found that even if you post something reasonable, the left will attack you mercilessly. And I have seen that in Branford. So I'm a Democrat. I'm a liberal on many, many, many issues. And I've spoken many times about local politics and Democrats doing rather stupid things, and I have been called things you can't possibly imagine by the Democrats. Now, most people are realizing a lot of that was nonsense. They were fed a bill of goods by their party. But the truth is, I've lived that. And I've seen the other side. The right is typically making an argument on freedom of speech and the Constitution, and there's a lot of hypocrisy in that. There's a lot in what they say. For the Democrats, you just get attacked mercilessly. They just assume if you say anything that says, well, let's be a little more reasonable here, that you're a Trump fan. It's not true, but in my experience recently, I've seen it worse from the left. And we saw this issue in Madison. We covered this in Madison. A woman literally just posted, oh, let's replace, the opponent was a bagel. Let's shoot a bagel instead of shooting a target. And they ran orchestrated campaigns to take her job from her. They sent out mass emails through the party to get that person to lose her livelihood and her job. That's not civil behavior. That's not normal or reasonable behavior. What about the silent majority who's afraid, who won't say they're for Trump? And that, I agree with you. That's what we just talked about. I think there's a lot of people when won't post on Facebook who they're voting for, won't post, won't answer polls on who they're voting for. So look at it this way. If you have 100 people, and it's 50-50, right? 50% for Trump and 50% for Biden. And they call them all up. And they go to a person in this area for Trump or for Biden. That one person says, I'm not answering. All right, that was a Trump supporter. So you're now 50% for Biden, 49% for Trump. But if that person doesn't say, I'm not a Trump supporter, or not voting, or not telling you, instead says, I'm voting for Biden, now Biden's 51-49. Biden has a 2-point lead, but it's false. So what if 4 or 5 Trump supporters do that? What if 7 or 8 Trump supporters do that, and the number is 57-43? And you could be showing Biden with a 13-14-point lead that is completely false. And that's the concern. And that happened 4 years ago. Yes, there were some other things, but that happened. Yes, Pete was right about the Comey investigation. There were other things that played a role, but this is where we have to be careful with the polling. Annette, have you watched MSNBC? It's terrible. I don't watch MSNBC. I do not watch Fox News. I don't watch either one of them. I get most of my news from Politico, Real Clear Politics, or I watch CNBC because I deal in stocks as well. Pete, I'm not part of the Clinton Defense Force. He was awful. I don't believe he was awful, but I think he gets a pass on major things that no one's giving Trump a pass for. It's just odd to me the Republican Congress and Newt Gingrich have largely been forgotten. And yeah, I'm extremely liberal. Liberals are worse online. The right trolls are scarier, but the left will try to bury anyone who doesn't agree, which is common among younger people. Yeah, you're right. Pete, I agree with that. I think I would have agreed with you on the scarier part probably 8-9 months ago. We're seeing some left groups get fairly violent, but the right trolls are scarier, but the left will try to bury anyone who doesn't agree with them 100%. I agree. And it's right. You could agree with them 99% and you get killed. You could advocate for being logical and reasonable and not being hypocritical and you get killed. And that's not helping. If your goal is to get Trump out of office, demonizing anybody who votes for Trump is not the way to do it. And if we get to November 4th, or who knows, January 7th, whenever this election is done, we have results. Part of this reason is there's going to be people who are not Trump fans, not necessarily Trump supporters, who said, you know what, I'm tired of this crap, I'm voting for him. That will happen. And so one of two things are going to happen. Trump wins in a nail-biter, or Biden wins in a blowout. And I don't see, somebody just posted Trump will win in a landslide. I don't see Trump winning in a landslide. He didn't win a landslide last time lost a national. You don't have to win that, but I don't see that happening. But a lot can change. We have a month to go. I think he would be drastically helped, significantly helped, by passing a stimulus plan where he can at least say to the American people, I put money in your pocket. But to do that, he has to do it now, because it's going to take time to process this stuff. He is not helped if everybody gets $1,200 checks on November 5th. That doesn't help his election. So it's interesting to look at the political games being played. I haven't seen much of a strategy on the right, but all of that can change if they were waiting to the last minute to push something. I don't see it happening. So Obamagate will destroy the left. Okay, well, that will not. David, have you watched News Nation on WGN? I've never heard of that. Is that bipartisan or nonpartisan or left or right? You can let me know in the comments. But we will be back tomorrow. We'll have Robin Comey on. We'll talk about state issues, some national as well, but mostly state, how the campaign is going. There were some claims we talked about last week that were made that I view as false about school redistricting, but she's, I'm not, I usually go to 4:30 here. I'm not going to talk about Obamagate, but we'll talk to Robin Comey tomorrow on state and national issues, and she's been focused on education most of her career and her time in Hartford, and we'll talk about that as well. Guys, thanks for joining me. It was a good discussion today. Thank you for the comments. It helps a lot when we can talk and then get comments back and forth. And we had the left and right on here, and I appreciate that. It means a lot. To those, I do appreciate, we've gotten a lot of donations the last couple of days. I appreciate that as well. And to all the emails and calls with questions and topics, I appreciate all of those. Guys, have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.